Lieutenant Zekthar stepped off the transport ship and looked around at the human military base. The alien soldier had traveled across 3 star systems to reach this place called Fort Harrison. His tall, blue-skinned body moved with the careful grace of a trained warrior. 4 arms hung at his sides, each ending in 3-fingered hands that could crush steel. His large, yellow eyes scanned everything with the attention of someone who had survived many battles. The Galactic Council had given him a simple job: watch the humans, learn how they fight, write a report about whether they deserve to join the Council as full members. Zekthar had done this work 12 times before with other new species. Most of them were weak. A few were strong but stupid. None had impressed him much. He expected humans to be the same. A human officer walked up to him. The man was much shorter than Zekthar, with dark skin and gray hair cut very short. He wore a uniform covered in small metal shapes that humans called medals. The man stopped in front of the alien and raised his hand to his forehead in what Zekthar knew was a human greeting called a salute. "Lieutenant Zekthar, welcome to Fort Harrison. I am Colonel Jake Morrison, base commander." The human spoke, slowly and clearly. The translation device in Zekthar's ear turned the words into his own language. Zekthar nodded. In his culture, warriors showed respect through actions, not words. "I am here to observe your military," he said. His voice was deep and had a strange echo because of the way his throat was built. Colonel Morrison smiled. Zekthar found this disturbing. In his experience, warriors who smiled too much were either fools or dangerous. "You'll be working with Alpha Company. Captain Lisa Rodriguez commands them. She's one of our best officers." They walked across the base together. Zekthar noticed many things that seemed wrong to him. Human soldiers walked around without perfect formations. Some of them were talking and laughing as they worked. Others were sitting on benches, eating food and joking with each other. In the Valdorian military, such behavior would result in severe punishment. "Your soldiers seem relaxed," Zekthar said, choosing his words carefully. Colonel Morrison laughed. "They're off duty. When it's time to fight, they'll be ready. You'll see." They entered a large building. Inside, Zekthar saw more humans working with weapons and equipment. A woman with dark hair, tied back in a tight knot, was checking a large gun. She looked up as they approached and stood up straight. "Captain Rodriguez, this is Lieutenant Zekthar from the Valdorian Empire. He'll be observing your company for the next few weeks." The woman was even shorter than Colonel Morrison, but something in her eyes reminded Zekthar of the veteran warriors from his home world. She extended her hand toward him. Zekthar knew this was another human greeting. He reached out with one of his 4 arms and carefully shook her much smaller hand. "Welcome to Alpha Company, Lieutenant. I hope you find your stay educational." Over the next few days, Zekthar watched the humans train. He met many of the soldiers. Sergeant Danny Walsh was a big man with red hair who seemed to never stop talking. He made jokes about everything, even serious things like weapons maintenance. Corporal Amy Chun was quiet but very smart. She could take apart and rebuild any piece of equipment faster than anyone else. Private First Class Kyle Johnson was young and eager, always volunteering for the hardest jobs. The alien soldier wrote detailed notes about everything he saw. The humans mixed advanced technology with simple tools in ways that made no sense. They used computers that could calculate the path of bullets across vast distances, but they also carried old-fashioned knives and wore metal plates for armor. Like ancient warriors, their training was also confusing. Sometimes they practiced shooting with perfect discipline and focus. Other times they ran obstacle courses while their officers shouted at them and made them do push-ups in the mud. Zekthar could not understand why warriors would need to crawl. under ropes or climb over walls when they had flying vehicles and teleportation devices. What bothered him most was how they talked to each other. Valdorian soldiers followed strict rules about rank and respect. Lower-ranking warriors never spoke to their superiors unless asked a direct question. They certainly never made jokes or argued about orders, but human soldiers did all of these things. He watched Sergeant Walsh argue with Captain Rodriguez about the best way to attack a practice target. Instead of punishing this disrespect, the captain listened to his ideas and changed her plan. Later, Zekthar saw Private Johnson make a joke about Lieutenant Brooks' haircut, and the lieutenant laughed instead of having the private arrested. "How do you maintain discipline?" Zekthar asked Captain Rodriguez one evening as they walked around the base. "What do you mean?" She replied, "Your soldiers show no proper respect for rank. They question orders. They make jokes during serious training. In my military, such behavior would not be tolerated." Captain Rodriguez stopped walking and turned to face him. "Lieutenant, my soldiers will follow me into hell if I ask them to. They'll die for each other and for people they've never met. But they're not robots. They're human beings with thoughts and feelings and opinions. That's what makes them strong." Zekthar did not understand. Strength came from discipline, from following orders without question, from putting the needs of the group before personal desires. These humans seemed to do the opposite of everything he had learned about military organization. That night, he wrote his first report to the Valdorian High Command. He described the humans as tactically confused, but technologically adequate. He recommended that they be given limited membership in the Galactic Council, with restrictions on their military activities. As he finished writing, Zekthar heard sounds from outside his quarters. He looked out the window and saw a group of human soldiers sitting around a small fire. They were singing songs and telling stories. Some of them were laughing so hard they could barely breathe. The alien soldier shook his head. These humans would never survive a real battle. They were too soft, too emotional, too undisciplined. He went to bed thinking about how much better his own species was at the art of war. He had no idea how wrong he was. The alarm woke Zekthar from a deep sleep. Red lights flashed in his quarters as a loud siren filled the air. The alien soldier jumped out of bed and quickly put on his uniform. He had heard this sound during training exercises, but this felt different, more urgent. He ran outside and saw human soldiers rushing in all directions. Everyone moved with purpose, but there was no panic. Captain Rodriguez stood near the main building, talking rapidly into a communication device. Her face was serious, but calm. "What is happening?" Zekthar asked when he reached her. "Emergency call from New Kepler mining colony. They're under attack by Kreth raiders." She looked at him with those steady eyes. "Big problem. The colony has about 800 civilians, including families with children." Zekthar felt his blood turn cold. He knew about the Kreth. They were a species of warriors who lived for battle and destruction. They took no prisoners. They showed no mercy. They were also excellent fighters with superior weapons and training. "How many Kreth ships?" he asked. 15 battle cruisers and about 3,000 ground troops. The alien soldier's mind raced through the calculations. 3,000 Kreth warriors were equivalent to at least 10,000 soldiers of most other species. The Kreth were bigger, stronger, and more vicious than almost any other life form in the galaxy. They also had better armor and weapons than most military forces. What forces are being sent to help the colony? Zekthar asked. Captain Rodriguez looked at him with what might have been surprise. "Alpha Company." "Just Alpha Company? How many soldiers is that?" 63, including myself." Zekthar stared at her. 63 humans against 3,000 Kreth warriors. It was not just suicide. It was insane. No rational military commander would even consider such a mission. Captain, perhaps you do not understand the situation. The Kreth are not ordinary enemies. They are among the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. 3 previous rescue attempts have failed completely. The Thorian Empire lost 200 soldiers. The Nexus Federation sent 500 troops, and none returned alive. I understand perfectly, Lieutenant. Her voice was steady and sure. But there are 800 people on that colony who need help. That's what we do. Colonel Morrison appeared beside them. Captain, the transport ship is ready. You have 20 minutes to prepare your team. Yes, sir. She started to walk away, then turned back to Zekthar. You're welcome to come along if you want. Might be educational. Zekthar watched her go, then turned to Colonel Morrison. Sir, you cannot be serious about this mission. It is impossible. Your soldiers will all die, and the colonists will die anyway. It serves no purpose. The colonel's expression was grim, but determined. Lieutenant, I've been in the military for 30 years. I've seen impossible missions before. Sometimes the only way to save lives is to risk everything. But the odds don't matter. Those people need help, and we're the only ones. Who can give it to them? Zekthar felt like he was talking to someone from another world. In Valdorian culture, warriors were trained to analyze every situation carefully. They fought when they could win and retreated when they could not. Honor was important, but survival was more important. These humans seemed to have their priorities completely reversed. He hurried to catch up with Captain Rodriguez. She was in the armory, checking weapons with her team. The mood was serious, but not desperate. Sergeant Walsh was making jokes about the food on the transport ship. Corporal Chun was calmly explaining to Private Johnson how to use a new type of explosive device. Captain, Zekthar said, I must ask you to reconsider this mission. My analysis shows a 97% probability of total failure. Your entire company will be killed, and the colonists will not be saved. She looked up from the rifle. She was cleaning. What's your point, Lieutenant? My point is that this mission is tactically impossible. You should refuse the orders. Several of the human soldiers stopped what they were doing and looked at him. Sergeant Walsh spoke first. Lieutenant, with respect, you don't know us very well yet. We've done impossible things before, added Corporal Chun. It's kind of our specialty. Private Johnson nodded eagerly. My grandfather always said that. When things look impossible, that's when humans do their best work. Zekthar felt frustrated. These humans seemed unable to understand basic military logic. You are talking about emotions and stories? I am talking about facts. The Kreth have superior numbers, better weapons, and more experience. They have defeated every force sent against them. Captain Rodriguez finished checking her rifle and slung it over her shoulder. Lieutenant, let me explain something to you. The Kreth are good fighters, but they have one weakness. They think like you do. They believe that superior numbers and better weapons always win. They've never fought humans before. What difference does that make? You'll see. They boarded the transport ship called the USS Defiance. It was smaller than the Valdorian warships Zekthar was used to, but it looked tough and fast. The human soldiers settled into their seats with the easy confidence of people who had done this many times before. Lieutenant Ryan Brooks, the company's second in command, was studying maps of the colony on a portable computer. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos was checking the medical supplies. Sergeant Tom Anderson was making sure all the communication equipment worked properly. As the ship lifted off, Zekthar tried one more time to make the humans understand. Captain, I have contacted my superiors. They agree that this mission is hopeless. They have given me permission to withdraw from what they consider a suicide mission. Captain Rodriguez looked at him with something that might have been pity. "Lieutenant, that's your choice. But let me tell you something about Alpha Company. We've been in situations like this before. We've been outnumbered, outgunned, and given up for dead. And we're still here. How is that possible? Because we don't fight like other species. We don't just follow rules and tactics from books. We adapt. We improvise. We never give up." She paused and looked around at her soldiers. "And we never leave anyone behind." The other humans nodded in agreement. Zekthar saw something in their faces that he had never seen before. It was not the blind courage of fools or the desperate hope of the doomed. It was something else entirely. Something that made him feel both impressed and frightened out as the transport ship flew toward New Kepler. Zekthar sent an urgent message to his superiors. He requested permission to withdraw from the mission. He explained that the humans were about to attempt something that was tactically impossible and morally insane. The response came back quickly. His commanders agreed with his assessment. They ordered him to observe from a safe distance and prepare. A full report on human military capabilities after the inevitable disaster. Zekthar looked around at the human soldiers. They were checking their weapons, reviewing their plans, and preparing for battle. Some of them were writing what looked like letters. Others were looking at pictures of people who were probably their families. None of them looked afraid. None of them looked like they expected to die. They looked like people who were going to work, doing a job they had done many times before. The alien soldier began to wonder if he understood humans at all. The USS Defiance shook violently as Kreth weapons hit its hull. Zekthar grabbed his seat as the lights flickered and alarms started ringing throughout the ship. Through the small window, he could see the surface of New Kepler getting closer, much faster than it should have been. "We're taking heavy fire," shouted the pilot over the noise. "Anti-aircraft weapons everywhere. I can't reach the landing zone." Captain Rodriguez moved quickly to the front of the ship. "How close can you get us?" "Maybe 15 kilometers from the colony. That's the best I can do. And that's where we go." The ship hit the ground hard. Zekthar felt his forearm slam against the restraints holding him in his seat. Around him, human soldiers were thrown forward as the transport skidded across the rocky surface of the planet. Smoke filled the air, and sparks flew from damaged electrical systems. When the ship finally stopped moving, Captain Rodriguez was already standing up. "Sound off. Who's hurt?" 3 soldiers raised their hands. Private Martinez had a broken arm. Corporal Stevens was bleeding from a cut on his forehead. Sergeant Brown could barely stand because of an injured leg. "Medical supplies?" the captain asked. "Half of them were in the cargo bay," replied Staff Sergeant Santos. "The bay doors are jammed shut." "Communications?" Sergeant Anderson shook his head. "The main transmitter is destroyed. We can't contact the base." "Weapons and ammunition?" "Lieutenant." Brooks checked his list. "We lost about 60% of our heavy weapons. Most of the ammunition is still good, but we don't have nearly enough for a long fight." Zekthar listened to this list of disasters and felt his worst fears being confirmed. The humans had lost most of their supplies, their communication, and their transportation. 3 soldiers were injured before the battle even started. Any reasonable military force would find a safe place to hide and wait for rescue. Instead, Captain Rodriguez nodded calmly. "All right, people. We knew this wasn't going to be easy. Time to adapt." She looked at her soldiers. "Brooks, take Martinez, Stevens, and Brown to that ridge over there. Set up a defensive position and treat the wounded. If we don't come back, try to signal for rescue." "Captain, I should come with you," Lieutenant Brooks said. "No. I need someone I trust to watch our backs. Santos, take Chung, Johnson, and Walsh. Circle around to the north side of the colony. Make noise. draw attention away from the main assault. "What about you, Captain?" asked Sergeant Santos. "I'm taking the rest of the team straight at them." Zekthar could not believe what he was hearing. The humans were dividing there already. Small force into 3 even smaller groups. It was the opposite of everything he had learned about military tactics. A smart commander would keep all available forces together to have the best chance of success. "Captain," he said, "this plan makes no sense. You are making yourselves weaker by splitting up." She looked at him with those steady eyes. "Lieutenant, you're thinking like a Valdorian. We're not trying to win a battle. We're trying to save people." The teens prepared quickly. Zekthar watched as Sergeant Walsh's group gathered materials from the crashed ship. They took broken pieces of metal, damaged electronic equipment, and even some of the emergency food supplies. He could not understand why they needed these things for a military mission. "What are you doing with that junk?" he asked Corporal Chun. She smiled at him. "Making surprises for the Kreth. Humans are good at improvising." The teams moved out. Zekthar stayed with Captain Rodriguez's main assault group. They moved carefully across the rocky terrain toward the colony. The alien soldier was impressed by how quietly the humans could move despite their heavy equipment. As they got closer, they could hear the sounds of battle. Kreth weapons made a deep humming sound when they fired. Human weapons from the colony defenders made sharp, cracking noises. The Kreth were winning. The sounds of human weapons were getting weaker and less frequent. "Captain," whispered Sergeant Anderson, "I can see the colony. The Kreth have it surrounded. At least 500 ground troops, maybe more." Captain Rodriguez studied the situation through her binoculars. The colony was built in a valley between 2 hills. The Kreth had set up their weapons on the high ground and were slowly destroying the buildings where the colonists were hiding. It was a perfect military position. There was no way to attack it without being seen and killed. "How do we get past them?" asked Private Johnson. "We don't," the captain replied. "We go through them." Zekthar felt his alien blood turn cold. "Captain, that is suicide. The Kreth will see you coming from a kilometer away. They will kill you before you get close. Not if they're looking the wrong way." Before he could ask what she meant, explosions started happening on the north side of the colony. Bright flashes lit up the sky, and the sound of the blasts echoed across the valley. The Kreth immediately turned their weapons toward the new threat. "Santos is doing her job," said Captain Rodriguez with satisfaction. "Now it's our turn." The assault team moved quickly down the hill. Zekthar was amazed by what he saw. The humans did not charge straight at the enemy like brave but stupid warriors. They did not try to find a safe position to shoot from like smart but cautious soldiers. Instead, they did things he had never seen before. Private Johnson crawled through a drainage pipe that ran under the Kreth position. The pipe was barely wide enough for a human, and it was full of mud and waste water. Any sane person would have refused to go in there. But Johnson disappeared into the pipe without hesitation. Sergeant Anderson used pieces of shiny metal to reflect sunlight into the eyes of Kreth gunners. This simple trick made it hard for them to aim properly. When they moved to avoid the light, other humans shot them from new positions. Captain Rodriguez herself did something that made Zikthar's mind hurt to watch. She walked calmly toward a group of Kreth warriors, carrying a white flag. In galactic military law, a white flag meant you wanted to surrender or negotiate. The Kreth stopped shooting and waited to see what she wanted. When she got close enough, she dropped the flag and threw 2 grenades at them. The explosions killed 4 Kreth and wounded several others. Then she ran away before they could react. "Is that legal?" Zekthar asked Sergeant Anderson. "We're not fighting a legal war, Lieutenant. We're fighting for people's lives." The battle continued for hours. The humans did things that should have been impossible. They turned crashed vehicles into mobile weapons platforms. They used mirrors and lights to confuse the enemy. They made fake soldiers out of spare uniforms and equipment to draw enemy fire. Away from real targets, most importantly, they never gave up. Even when they were outnumbered 10-1, even when they were running out of ammunition, even when they were wounded and tired, they kept fighting. They kept moving toward the colony where the civilians were trapped. Zeet Thar watched a human soldier named Corporal Davis get shot in the leg. Instead of retreating to safety, Davis dragged himself to a better position and continued shooting at the enemy. When he ran out of bullets, he threw rocks at the Kreth with deadly accuracy. He saw Private Murphy use a broken piece of the transport ship as a shield while he rescued a wounded colonist. The metal plate was so heavy that it should have been impossible for one person to carry, but Murphy managed to drag both the shield and the injured civilian to safety dock as the sun began to set. Something incredible happened. The humans had actually fought their way to the colony. They had broken through the Kreth lines and reached the buildings where the civilians were hiding. It should have been impossible, but they had done it. But the battle was far from over. The Kreth were angry now, and they were bringing in more soldiers. Soon the humans would be trapped inside the colony with the people they had come to save. Zeethar realized that the humans had not come here to win a battle. They had come to do something much harder. They had come to save lives, even if it cost them their own. For the first time in his life, the alien soldier began to understand what courage really meant. Inside the colony, Zekthar saw something that shocked him even more than the battle outside. The humans were not acting like soldiers anymore. They were acting like protectors. Captain Rodriguez knelt beside a small human child who was crying. The little girl had been separated from her parents during the attack. Instead of focusing on military objectives, the captain spent precious minutes comforting the child and helping her find her family. "Captain," Zekthar said urgently, "the Kreth are preparing another assault. You need to organize your defenses." "In a minute, Lieutenant." She continued talking softly to the frightened child until the girl's mother arrived. Only then did she turn her attention back to the battle. Zekthar could not understand this behavior. In Valdorian military doctrine, the mission always came first. Personal feelings and individual needs were secondary to the greater good. But these humans seemed to put individual lives above everything else, including their own survival. Private Johnson appeared at the captain's side. His uniform was torn and dirty, and he was bleeding from several small wounds. "Captain, I managed to disable the Kreth communication array. They can't coordinate their attacks as well now." "Good work, Johnson. How bad are you hurt?" "Nothing serious, ma'am. But I have bad news. There are more Kreth ships coming, maybe 20 or 30 more. They'll be here in a few hours." Captain Rodriguez nodded grimly. "Then we need to get these people out of here fast." She gathered her remaining soldiers. Zekthar counted only 37 humans left from the original 63. Many of them were wounded. They were almost out of ammunition. The Kreth still outnumbered them by more than 50-1. "Listen up, people," the captain said. "We have 847 civilians to evacuate. The nearest safe zone is 12 kilometers away. We have to get them there before the Kreth reinforcements arrive." Sergeant Walsh raised his hand. "Captain, with respect, that's impossible. The Kreth have the high ground. They'll pick us off as soon as we leave the colony. Then we make sure they're looking somewhere else." Captain Rodriguez outlined her plan. It was the most insane thing Zekthar had ever heard. She wanted to divide her tiny force into even smaller groups. Some would create diversions to draw the Kreth away from the evacuation route. Others would escort the civilians to safety. A few would stay behind to cover the retreat. "This is madness," Zekthar said. You are guaranteeing that some of your soldiers will die. Maybe, Captain Rodriguez replied. But that's what we signed up for. Our job is to protect people, not to survive. The alien soldier watched as the humans prepared for what they all knew might be their last battle. They did not complain about the impossible odds. They did not argue about who should take the most dangerous jobs. Instead, they volunteered for them. Sergeant Santos stepped forward. I'll take the diversion team, Captain. Give me 6 volunteers. Immediately, 12 soldiers raised their hands. Santos had to choose which ones to take with her. The others looked disappointed that they could not volunteer for the most dangerous mission. Lieutenant Brooks was supposed to stay with the wounded at the offensive position outside the colony. But when he heard about the evacuation plan, he abandoned his safe position and brought his entire team to help. Brooks, what are you doing here? Captain Rodriguez asked. These people need our help, Captain. We couldn't stay behind while you did all the work. Private Martinez was there too, even though his arm was still broken. I can still shoot with one hand, ma'am. Zekthar felt something he had never experienced before. These humans were not just willing to die for strangers. They were eager to do it. They competed with each other for the chance to sacrifice themselves for people they had never met. In Valdorian culture, warriors were honored for their victories and their survival. The greatest heroes were those who lived longest and won the most battles. But these humans seemed to measure honor differently. They measured it by how much they were willing to give up for others. The evacuation began at sunset. Sergeant Santos led her diversion team toward the main Kreth position. They carried improvised explosive devices made from mining equipment and ship parts. Their job was to create as much noise and confusion as possible. Zekthar watched them go and knew he would probably never see them again. They were walking into certain death, and they were doing it with smiles on their faces. Santos is a good soldier, Captain Rodriguez said quietly. She has 2 children back on Earth. She's never even seen her youngest daughter. Then why is she doing this? Because that's what humans do. We protect children, even if they're not our own. The main evacuation group moved slowly through the darkness. 800 civilians, including many elderly people and small children, had to travel 12 kilometers across rough terrain while staying hidden from the enemy. It should have been impossible, but the humans made it work. They carried the small children on their backs. They supported the elderly and injured. They shared their food and water with people who had lost everything. They did all of this while watching for enemy attacks and protecting the group from danger. Zekthar saw Private Johnson give his last energy bar to a hungry child. He saw Corporal Chun use her own medical supplies to treat a wounded civilian. He saw Sergeant Anderson carry an elderly man who could not walk, even though Anderson himself was limping from an injured leg. The alien soldier realized that these humans were not just protecting the colonists. They were treating them like family, like people who mattered more than their own lives. As they moved through the night, explosions and gunfire could be heard from the direction of the colony. Sergeant Santos and her team were still fighting, still drawing the Kreth attention away from the evacuation. But the sounds were getting weaker and less frequent. They're running out of ammunition, Lieutenant Brooks said quietly. Captain Rodriguez nodded. They know that. They'll keep fighting until they can't fight anymore. And then they'll find another way to keep the Kreth busy. Zekthar did not understand what she meant until he saw the final explosion. It was much bigger than the others, and it lit up the entire sky. The sound of the blast echoed across the landscape for several minutes. What was that? He asked. Captain Rodriguez's voice was very quiet. Santos found the Kreth ammunition depot. She and her team destroyed it. Did they survive? No. The alien soldier felt something strange in his chest. Humans called it sadness. but it was stronger than anything he had ever experienced. He had barely known Sergeant Santos, but her sacrifice affected him deeply. Why did she do it? He asked. Captain Rodriguez looked at him with those steady eyes. Because 800 people needed to live, more than 6 people needed to survive. They continued walking through the darkness. Behind them, the sounds of battle faded away. Ahead of them lay safety, but only if they could reach it before the Kreth reinforcements arrived. Zekthar looked around at the human soldiers. They were exhausted, wounded, and heartbroken by the loss of their friends, but they kept moving. They kept protecting the civilians. They kept doing their job. The alien soldier began to understand that he was not just watching a military operation. He was witnessing something that his species had never learned how to do. He was seeing what happened when warriors cared more about others than they cared about themselves. The sun was rising when they finally reached the safe zone. Zekthar counted the civilians as they arrived at the evacuation point. 847 people. Every single person from the colony had made it to safety, but the cost had been terrible. Only 29 human soldiers remained from the original 63. 12 were dead, including Sergeant Santos and her entire team. 22 were wounded, some so badly they would never fight again. Captain Rodriguez sat on a rock, watching as medical teams treated the injured civilians. Her uniform was torn and dirty. She had a bandage around her left arm and another on her forehead, but her eyes were still steady and calm. "Captain," Zekthar said, "I do not understand. You lost more than half your soldiers. Many of those who survived will never be the same. How can you consider this a success?" She looked at him with surprise. "Lieutenant, look around you. 847 people are alive because of what we did today. Families are together. Children will grow up to have their own families. That's not just success, that's victory. But your soldiers knew what they were signing up for. Every one of them volunteered for this mission. They chose to risk their lives for strangers, because that's what humans do." Zekthar watched as the surviving soldiers worked with the medical teams. Private Johnson was helping to treat wounded civilians, even though his own injuries needed attention. Corporal Chun was setting up communication equipment to call for more help. Lieutenant Brooks was organizing the evacuation to a permanent safe location. None of them were celebrating. None of them were talking about their victory over the Kreth. Instead, they were quietly taking care of the people they had saved and mourning the friends they had lost. "I need to write my report," Zekthar said. "Of course. I'm sure your superiors will want to know what happened here." The alien soldier went to his temporary quarters and sat down at his computer. He stared at the blank screen for a long time. How could he explain what he had witnessed? How could he describe something that went against everything he had learned about warfare and military strategy? He began to write to the Valdorian High Command. Subject: Assessment of Human Military Capabilities. I have completed my observation of the human military force known as Alpha Company. My initial assessment was incorrect. The humans are not tactically confused or militarily inadequate. They are something far more dangerous. The humans do not fight like any other species in the galaxy. They do not follow traditional military doctrine. They do not prioritize their own survival above all else. Instead, they fight for principles that I am only beginning to understand. During the new Kepler mission, I watched 63 human soldiers attempt to rescue 800 civilians from 3,000 Kreth warriors. By all logical analysis, this mission should have failed completely. The humans should have been defeated within hours. Instia,